Welcome back to Tig's Bits. This week we have Carter Bryant on. He was one of the first guests ever on the show on Tig's Bits, and am very thankful to have him coming back on this week. It is a college football preview. Welcome back, buddy. It is good to see you, man. How you been?
World class, baby. One of the best sports, the best sport is back.
The best.
And it's interesting. This is the final year that college football will be in this form. And I want people to enjoy it, man. This is the final year where, the regular season really is going to be what it is. And that's what makes the sport beautiful. Each and every week, you got to bring it. I didn't know that we'd be talking some Troy Trojans football, man. I did not.
Yeah, well, I came in here to disrupt on purpose, right? I gave him about a 15-minute notice. Hey, I'm going to jump in on this action too. So we're talking college football.
It's so strange. It's so strange. It's like LSU, Troy. The one non-Power 5 school that all LSU fans have rough memories about. Brantley's like, let me get this guy as a co-host.
Get him in. Let me get this guy in here. Absolutely, dude.
I was like, dang, is DeMarcus Ware going to join us at some point here? I don't know. But no, it's good to see you, Blassie, and really excited about the season. I wasn't at the second Troy game. I was at the first comeback one. Thank goodness I wasn't at the second one. I think I don't even remember what I was doing. I'm glad I didn't see it, though.
Well, I happened to be there. Brantley hosted me. I went to the awesome tailgate. It was phenomenal.
Oh, you were there?
Absolutely.
Oh, my God. And you still have this guy on your show, Brantley?
That's how much I love Blassie, the one-man posse, Carter. There are reasons why that go predate that exchange. It was I had it coming kind of deal. Like I hosted a party in Florida when he was my neighbor in Florida, and LSU played Troy. I think it was the first time. It was a trilogy? Am I?
Yeah. So there was an 03 game too as well when DeMarcus Ware and OCU Manure were bookending there. It was a tough. We lost it at the very end of that game, and then the second one was the big comeback that LSU had.
The second one was the one that I said, you know what? Because I lived in Florida, it was a 5.5 hour drive to get to Baton Rouge every week, and I had only missed from 1987 until that was, I believe, 2008. I think I'd only missed maybe 2 home games in that time span, 2 or 3. It was a major accomplishment. And then I'm like, all of my boys are here. We're at the freaking beach. It's 5 hours. We're playing Troy. I think I'm going to just stay home. I'm going to have a watch party because it was on Tiger Vision at the time, and I had Direct TV. Like, we're going to have us a watch party, and everybody, all Troy fans, y'all come on over to Tig's. We're going to have us a good time.
Oh, my
God.
They
did. They did. For 3.5 quarters. They had them a damn good time. And then LSU, the largest comeback in the history of LSU, wins that game. Obnoxious probably is not the correct word for the handful of LSU fans that were there that day. So we celebrated mightily, and they were just crushed. Then you fast forward to the game that we don't like to talk about, that propelled LSU to a national championship, by the way.
It did.
But
it did.
it really did. But yes, Chad did come that day, and I was with him in the stadium when they secured the victory.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's a good point, though, Brantley. I remember, Devin White meeting with Coach Orgeron after that, and then the LSU beating Florida in Gainesville, and that started, it didn't start the Florida win streak, but you won that one, you lost the next one, and then LSU has beaten Florida every year since then. Yep. And it's wild. I do remember where I was for the Troy loss. I was still doing stand-up, and I had booked to do like a private gig in somebody's house, like 3 hours away. And I remember I bombed. It was horrible. It was just so bad. I didn't
a little distracted.
It wasn't what I was expected, and I know I bombed because like I got a text knowing that the game was getting squirrely, and then it was after the game was over. I was at some random gas station listening to it on the radio, and hearing that we lost, dude, I wanted to freaking cry. I bombed so
Dude,
bad.
it was
just a bad night.
And then
yeah.
and then I did not think anybody could bomb worse than me that night. But gosh darn it, LSU did.
It's just one of those nights, man. They happen, you know.
Well, I'll say this.
They absolutely happen.
It's, dude, like, so, right, we played LSU 3 different times. But, dude, I've always had immense respect for LSU. There's no bitterness towards LSU. Like, I'm a big LSU guy. I love LSU.
He roots for us.
Yeah, I've never, like, it's never been like, you know, a hatred or anything like, oh, they beat us. No, dude, I think it's awesome. Like, hell, we even did what we did in the second game. I'm a realistic guy. 31-3 up on LSU. How in the hell did we do that to begin with? So, I mean, it sucks that we lost at the end, yes. And it is sweet that we got that win. Absolutely. But, dude, to me, it's like, you know what? Great for LSU, and I was glad to see you guys go on that run. I was rooting for you the whole way. So, yeah, I mean.
He was.
Yeah, I don't have the, like, it's different in this state. You know how I feel? At least you guys will play us, unlike these other 2 schools in this state that refuse to play us, you know, and they've never played us and they probably never will. So, yeah, I have an immense amount of respect for LSU. So,
what's even more shocking, Carter, is that we have a third co-host that's usually running with us. He's a freaking Alabama fan. So I don't know what's happening here at Tig's Bits, but we cover everything. We're covering everybody. It's nothing but love over here at the Tig's Bits show. And, you know, we haven't worked through a football season together yet. So this whole thing could just absolutely collapse on itself.
Good.
There's a possibility.
And I hope it does. I do.
I figured you did. Yeah, you're here for it. And we'll make sure that it's all documented as this goes down. But, yeah, we're about to be tested. The show is about to be tested with a football season, and that leads me into that. I know that you have before we jump into talking about football, please give us a rundown on your socials, where everybody can listen to you, follow you, all of that good stuff. He has Power Hour LSU that he covers exclusively LSU if you're looking for news there. And then he has Power Hour SEC as well, covering the entire SEC. What have I missed here, Carter?
No, those are 2 big ones. Obviously, I do some fantasy football stuff with the Underdog Fantasy and some of that. Obviously, it's fantasy football season. But yeah, man, those are my 2 main things, right? Those, I've been very fortunate to, you know, have some success doing it. I'm not Logan Paul or Mr. Beast or anything like that on YouTube, but it's fun to get to do it, and people like you support the show, and that obviously goes a long way. But it's interesting. I was thinking about this season for LSU. Obviously, the Florida State game is what everyone's getting excited about,
right?
But just from, you know, top to bottom, you look at the entire SEC. I think in this final season of what could be the last it is the last iteration of what college football is going to be, I think this SEC season can get very wild. Normally, we have a very static and rigid SEC at the top. I think, obviously, with the East, I think every single one of us are going to pick Georgia. But in the West, I could see some real movement with the shuffling that's happening in Alabama. Obviously, LSU has some holes, and Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Texas A&M have some very interesting teams this year. So, really excited about just even if you take off, you know, the LSU shirt and all the LSU stuff and the LSU channel, you're sort of looking at it as a neutral perspective. The SEC is very strong in the West this year.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun ride. I mean, there are so many little uncertainties, so many little tangents and things that just have to play out, and that's the beauty of it. Do you think that this season will have an asterisk by it in the book, or not really an asterisk, but like a dividing line, kind of like when you go back with college football and you consider the 70s and further back, really even the mid-80s and further back, kind of older football, and then the 80s until now, I would consider modern football, wouldn't you think that moving forward from this point on, it's going to be labeled something else? Because it is going to be a completely different game next year.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure, Brantley, you were there for the Bama game last year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that game felt so different. Like, there's been, I've gotten asked about the 2019 season, and obviously it was great. But that Bama game last year felt so different. I get chills even thinking about it. And to me, what I don't think people realize, obviously that was a big turning point for the Brian Kelly era. It won the West, that one play, Mason Taylor, but the whole game. What made it so special was that pretty much locked Alabama out of the playoff, right?
Yeah.
And they still ended up number 5. They still almost got it.
They still made it interesting.
So if the playoff was expanded in any shape, form, or fashion, all the LSU fans that might watch this, your ticket got devalued. Your experience got devalued. Because for me, obviously, selfishly, us as LSU fans, we're really excited that happened for our team, right? You were at the end of that Orgeron era. You had 39 scholarship guys. You had a really good quarterback at Jaden Daniels come in and really do some good things last year. You had Brian Kelly coming in. You had all these new guys. Jarek Bernard Converse transferring in, who was at Oklahoma State. You had all these guys come together and put together this one great thing, and that was good for LSU as a whole. But it also made college football better, right? Yeah. It made what Alabama did in the regular season really count. Yeah. And when you take that away, it takes away what happened on that night, the immediacy of what happened on that night away. It devalues it. It doesn't matter how you cut it. And yes, the counter argument would be, well, that means more games in a 12-team playoff would have even more value. And I can kind of see that, but I like it when if you lose 2 games, you're probably out. And it's because your regular season counts. Take away even the LSU-Alabama game. Let's talk about Columbia, South Carolina. All right? Completely different program. Program that's not in some major metropolitan. It's not Dallas or Chicago or whatever. One random night in Columbia, South Carolina cost Tennessee their playoff. It did.
That's very true.
That town, which doesn't have that great of a college football program, South Carolina's a good program. That one random night counted for something. In the major, and that's what makes college football great. These, these rural areas, right? Like if, let's just say LSU was in the college football playoff race in 2017. The Troy Trojans ended their playoff chances that freaking night.
Absolutely.
Right? With the 12 team, let's just say LSU were to only lose one other game in that game versus Troy, they're probably still, getting in that year. Yep. So I understand. I'm still going to love college football after this season, but it will dramatically change. And that's what I think college football did for all of us and made us realize that great regular seasons make college football and that sport spectacular. It's why the NFL, they've expanded their playoff. That kind of sucks. But really, we've seen it in the MLB. We've seen it in the NBA. It sucks when you go to one of these gazillion games and all they tell you at the end of the year, no, the only thing that matters is this 1 month of the season. Right. It's freaking wild. But I'm off my soapbox. We'll move on.
Well, no, that is a very fair point. It's a great point. You take away some of the traditions. You're going to take away that Alabama LSU game, though it will still be a big game in 2024. It isn't going to be a make or break game for either team. Let's say they're both undefeated going into that. Let's hope whoever loses, if they lose a close game, it doesn't even matter if it's close or not. If you're undefeated in November, it ain't going to matter. You're going to the playoffs. As long as you handle the next 2 or 3 games and you win those, you can stumble. It allows you to stumble, and you're exactly right. All these stadiums have expanded over the 2000s. They've gone from 80 and 85,000 seat stadiums to 100, 110,000 seat stadiums. That attendance is going to go down. This is going to be an issue It is going to be an issue over the next decade. It's already an issue to get butts in the seats and to get those butts that come to the seats to stay the whole game. It's not just a rampant problem at LSU if they're playing, Southern or Grambling or something like that, and the game's no longer in question and going into the second half. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. It's like, they're up 49-0. They're going to win. Let's go home. Let's just get to the house. I'm just as guilty of it at times for sure. But I think that's going to be a bigger thing. How will these schools continue to pay all of these programs, pay the players? We haven't even dove into NIL and all of that. Do these types of things. It's turning into a league. It's turning into a professional league. It's mini NFL is what it's going to be.
Yeah. It's changing dramatically. But now, I will offer a counter argument on this. So for me, obviously being a Troy fan and from the group of five, so you start the football season with 131 teams, right? So 66 of those are group of five teams. Up until next year, there's been really no pathway to get there. We've seen it before. Right. You run the table, you're still going to be sitting at 5 or 6 or somewhere. I'm not saying you deserve to be 1, 2, or 3. I'm not saying that. But in basketball and in baseball, there's a pathway when you start the season at the highest level. We're at the FBS level. There should be a pathway to get there. So everything you stated is absolute fact. Is it going to take away from that win in the Alabama-LSU game? 100% it is. There's no argument against that. But as college football as a whole, I think it betters the game to where, hey, you know what? Troy, UCF, back in the day, several years ago when they, self-proclaimed themselves national champions. They went undefeated, though. I can see how they were like, man, we just want a chance. Even if you get beat, you know what? You still got to go through this, guys. These guys had a great team. They had a magical year. You got to beat them. You know what I mean? So to me, that's what I like about it. I think you could have done it with less teams. I think you could have done it with a couple more teams and let the highest rated group of 5 team in somewhere at 6 or somewhere in the 8 range. But 12, I don't know. There's arguments both ways. I just wanted hey, if you're the highest rated group of 5, give that team an opportunity in that season to go and continue to keep going some way. So they've accomplished that. You've created other problems, but I think overall for college football, I think it's going to be better for the whole game. So
no, I'm with you. That is one of the benefits. You get a group of 5 team in. Yeah. My counter to that would be is you are going to have Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia in it every year, and that's what really stinks about it, because if those teams are in it, especially knowing they're going to have so much more experience on how to get ready for a playoff game, how to play in a neutral site, and they have the best rosters. But I do agree that group of 5s do deserve some inclusion, but at the same time, group of 5s are just going to keep getting destroyed in that game. And what I think you could do is have a separate playoff for group of 5. And I know that sounds watered down or whatever, but
like a play-in.
I like that. When would you do it? At the end of the year? Just have a separate.
But have their own separate thing, or could you have a play-in tournament?
Yeah, you could have the 2 highest rated group of 5s, and that be the national champion for the group of 5 level. It's a completely different ball game that Troy and those teams have to play. It's almost a different sport. Now, obviously, getting to do this. I've gotten to know personnel directors and all these people at different programs. I know a lot at FCS, non-Power 5, SEC, and all that stuff. What a school like Troy and these middle tier good group of 5 schools have to deal with is obviously getting your best players poached by the Power 5 with the portal now, with NIL and that stuff. It is amazing how much more things those middle tier programs like Troy, Tulane, the Cajuns, and all that. It's hard. It's absolutely brutal. Yeah. Look at LSU. They had Mekhi Gardner last year from the Cajuns. They have Kyron Lacey this year from the Cajuns. They were really good players, obviously, at that last school that they were with. We've even seen schools like not even the best SEC schools like Arkansas, they've poached the best group of 5 players because they have a bankroll and they play in the SEC, and that matters for recruits. So there's obviously I am going to be excited about group of 5 presence being in the playoff. My fear for you, Blasi, is look, college football, the guys that are at the top of the totem pole here, they're sharks. They have no morals. They want the most money that they possibly can get. I could see a world where they say, F the little guy. We're just putting the 12 best teams in that we think are the 12 best teams. That would be my biggest fear, because one of my favorite things is the group of 5 aspect of it. And I'm glad you held me accountable for that. But I'm telling you right now, that's what really concerns me about college football is everyone's in it to try and get their best dollar, and I get that to a certain extent, but man, it's sad. It's sad to see.
It is. It really is. RIP to college football as we know it. But as you have said, we have a whole year left of the old way, if you will. So we have to enjoy it. I think it's important that we're talking about this before the season even starts, because I mean, honest to God, I really hadn't thought about it like we're talking about it right now. I haven't truly let that sink in, and I'm going to enjoy this whole season a hell of a lot more just with that thought in the back of my mind of, obviously you and I are LSU fans, but let's say we drop a couple of games and we're like, crap, let's just enjoy the ride. Next year we'll drop these 2 games. It may not make a damn bit of difference. We still may be able to sneak into the playoffs and then make a run. So I'm with that. In the SEC, do you see anybody that could be a dark horse, a Tennessee, an Arkansas, an Ole Miss, anybody like that could maybe make a little run that we're not thinking about on paper, at least anyhow?
Yeah, in the East, I just have a tough time seeing anyone beating Georgia. I mean, they get Brock Bowers back. He's the best player in the conference. I think they'll be good enough at quarterback, but, their offensive line's back. They're motivated. They should have won the Joe Moore Award last year. They didn't get it. So that group is led by a kid from New Orleans, Cedric Van Pran, and they're going to be really good in the trenches. And then defensively, it's Kirby's defense. They're going to be solid. So I look at the East. One of my more favorite plays this year is the under on Tennessee's win total. I think we'll see some regression there with everything that they lost. I'm a big hypo guy. I picked Tennessee to win the East last year. Yeah. I hammered the table for their over on the win total. Obviously, that cleared, and they were one of the best teams in college football last year. I think when you lose all of what they lost offensively and defensively, they lost their best tackle, their 2 best receivers, their quarterback. They lost their 2 best defensive linemen, their best linebacker. It's going to be a tough rebuild. There, obviously, Florida's still in the rebuilding phase, and then you look at the rest of the East. Kentucky, the most fraudulent program in the SEC. I think this year they'll have a really, really good season. I like what they have. I like the way their schedule sets up. They have the easiest first month of the season schedule we have ever seen in the SEC. So ever. I mean, go look at it. You'll be shocked. And South Carolina, their schedule's too brutal. So for right now, I think Georgia is that's going the East. Now in the West, this is where it gets spicy, right? Alabama is hobbled, right? They obviously have the best blue chip ratio in the country. So in terms of raw talent, recruiting high school talent, they're the best. But you don't know who your quarterback is. You change your OC. You change your DC. Nick, I think, regressed some in his in-game coaching last year. We saw some of that versus LSU. Yeah. Everyone's going to pick Alabama. They have the most talented roster, all that stuff. But I think they'll struggle some this year. I think so. And this opens up the door for LSU to go back-to-back. I think LSU is the team to beat. Even objectively put, they return the best defensive player in the conference. They return their quarterback, return OC, return DC, return their 2 tackles, return their best receiver, get their most talented defensive tackle back, return their defensive tackle last year, who was an All-American. They have a lot of pieces, right? But where it gets interesting, Brantley, is the rest of the West. And I do think there are 3 teams that have a pathway forward here, right? I think Auburn isn't one of those teams. I think they'll get going by the end of the season. And you should be very worried about that game if you're an LSU fan. I project that game to be a day game, which kind of sucks. The way the TV schedules work this year, CBS gets to pick the first 2 games that weekend, and that's an 11 a.m. kick and a 2:30 kick. So I think CBS is going to want one of the more rarer LSU Auburn games moving forward to be a part of it. So it should be interesting there. But obviously, I think Mississippi State's going to be terrible this year.
Yeah.
But I think everyone else in the West is going to have a pulse.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the other 3 teams that have a pathway forward, Arkansas. They return, to me, the best quarterback in the conference in KJ Jefferson. I think what KJ has done these past couple of seasons is very underrated in college football. We have not seen one player truly carry a team quite like him in a while, right? It has a watered down Cam Newton kind of feel to it because Cam wasn't surrounded by the absolute deepest cast of superstars. And KJ's done that these past couple of years, and it would not shock me if he got Arkansas to a really strong 8-4, 9-3 record this year because he is that good. And then, obviously, the teams that you should worry about the most outside of Alabama, if you're an LSU fan, is Ole Miss and Texas A&M, right? Yep. So, here's a stat. Ole Miss and Texas A&M are the only teams in the SEC, Brantley, that don't have to play back-to-back road games. And why is that relevant? So, historically, and this is a stat that we discovered on our channel, and we've bet it like crazy, and it's worked. Okay, I'll put it that way. When you play back-to-back road games, it's hard. It's really hard. There have only been 3 teams since 2019, Brantley and Blassie, that have been able to win both games in a back-to-back road game in the SEC. And that was 2018 Florida, a team with Kyle Pitts, Kadarius Toney, absolutely stacked team, right?
Yep.
Led by Dan Mullen. And 2019 LSU and 2022 Georgia. So we're talking about 3 of the most talented teams we've ever seen in the SEC.
How many back-to-back games have there been like that in that same time period?
A lot. So there have been over 40, I think, instances of that.
Wow.
And only 3 teams have been able to win both.
That is unbelievable.
Wow,
So
that's an incrediable stat. Good job. Good dig there for the Power Hour LSU crew there.
That's
Write that down for the books.
Do, man. So that's taken out 2020 data because there weren't real road games, right?
Yeah. Right.
Fans matter more in college football than any other sport, if you ask me. So, if you take out that, you only had those 3 teams that have been able to win both of them. Nick's not been able to do it. It's hard to go on the road and win both those games. But the thing is not every team has to play that, right? College football, like we were talking about a minute ago, it's a very unbalanced schedule. You play more home games than you do road games, so it's rare. So you look last year, the only team in the SEC West that didn't have to do that was LSU, right? So that helped them because
it did. Absolutely.
Yeah. So one final thing, A&M and Ole Miss don't have to do that this next year. Ole Miss's schedule is way harder than A&M's though. They have to go to Tulane in week 2, and they get the 1-12 draw of playing at Georgia because of how the cross-division rival rule. So they get very unlucky that their really talented team draws in the final year of how the schedule format is going to be, the 1-12 shot that you have to go to Sanford and play Georgia. You look at A&M's schedule, okay? This is what makes Jimbo's failure so interesting, is if you go actually run the strength of schedule numbers, A&M's strength of schedule is way weaker than everybody else in the West. So Jimbo has not only struggled, he has struggled with huge advantages in SOS, right? And this year they get a bunch of huge advantages. don't have any back-to-back road games, and they get a few really good teams on the back end of back-to-back road games. They get Arkansas on the back end of a back-to-back road game. Even though Arkansas is playing a neutral in Dallas, you still got to travel there.
Right.
And here's a big thing. They get Alabama on the back end of a back-to-back road game this year. And they'll get a bye week. The only thing is that Tennessee will be coming off a bye week. They did get Tennessee out of the East, so it's a little unlucky of a draw. But if Jimbo lets Bobby call the plays, this could be a very scary team this next year.
They're the one team that scares the hell out of me that nobody really is talking about as much as Tommy TK was on here. Tommy Chrysan was on last week, and we're talking, and he said, if you notice, I didn't even mention Texas A&M. I was like, no, you didn't. But I think that's the thing that's scaring me is that no one's talking about them. They've written them off. 8-4 A&M, 8-4 every year. You know what though? I mean, they have talent. Yes, obviously, they bought a lot of that last year. They have, we can debate on how good Jimbo is, but he has proven over time that he can coach. Petrino coming in, if he's fresh and not drinking and chasing whores, then that guy's going to, then he could be strong. So they scare me on paper because they've been written off. And I have a feeling that those kids are going to feel the same way. Last year when we had this conversation, made fun of them. I will not do that this year whatsoever. Plus they beat us. I mean, that kind of knocked a little bit of that tarnish off of fun, but no printing the cups this season. But yeah, dude, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about A&M. They're my dark horse of who I think could potentially make a run. But as you allude to, it ain't going to be easy. If they get there and they do it, then they've earned it.
Yeah, and this is a good thing if you're an LSU fan for two reasons. All right. The first is, it could crash and burn. You have two coaches with two of the biggest egos ever. One that, Jimbo isn't socially awkward. Socially, he's for most, he's kind of fun to be around. Bobby is not like that. I've had a few interactions with Bobby before. He is awkward. All right, so this could crash and burn. All right, it could also hit big, and that's the kind of scary thing, right?
Yeah.
But if you're an LSU fan, this is a good thing. Is Jimbo sucks on the road. And you get them in Baton Rouge in a major revenge spot. If you are LSU, as big of a revenge spot as you're gonna see, because A&M was, for a team that only finished 5-7, they were obnoxious after that beatdown that they gave us. So, in particular, Harold Perkins will be fired up for that game. That was the first game he struggled all year. So.
Right.
And that was a team he almost went to. So I'm sure he heard the end of it. So I'm really excited about that game to end the season in Baton Rouge. And Braylon, my hottest take is that game will decide the West this year.
Oh.
And I think so. And what would make that very interesting is normally it's Alabama-Auburn that's in that spot, right? Where either one of those teams, more often Alabama than Auburn, it's to get ready for the SEC championship game. One of those teams are going to be in it. Sometimes it was us, obviously. I think this year it'll be that, right? So awesome. I do like A&M. I do like their over 7.5 win total. I do think it's going to work itself out. You look at their blue chip ratio, which is a percentage of 4-star or better players on their roster. Mainly, they have the same amount as Georgia. Their blue chip ratio is near identical. So college football is a talent sport. And Jimbo's the worst coach in the SEC. I truly do believe it. But if he gets the hell out of the way and lets Bobby Petrino, who has been one of the best coaches in the sport, when it comes to offensive yard per play, any metric you want to look at, if you let him cook, watch out.
Yeah, it absolutely could be it will be interesting to watch. It could be scary for Tiger fans and for all of you other fans that are listening out there of other schools. Watch out for A&M. Just watch out for them. Will anybody in the SEC go undefeated?
Yeah, I could see Georgia. I could.
Yeah.
And I honestly could see LSU. I could see it. I don't believe it right now. My board has LSU 10-2 going into this next year. Obviously, depending on where the losses happen, that still could get you in a spot versus Georgia, kind of like last year. If LSU would have beaten A&M, they would have been in a spot. If they beat Georgia, they're in, and they would have been a 2-loss team in. More than likely, they would have been in. It would have been very tight, honestly. But yeah, I right now I have LSU as a 10-2 team, but they could do it. I definitely could see Georgia doing it. I think those are the only two schools at this point I think could run the table.
What about outside of the SEC? Of course, a lot of media attention on Michigan this year. Is this the year that Michigan's for real? Are they for real? Do they really have a shot? Do you think they can make it to the playoffs?
Here's my thing, right? If you are an LSU fan watching this, I'm sure there's a good bit of LSU. I'd say probably 70% LSU fans, 20% Troy fans, and 10% of regular people out there watching this. I will say this about Michigan. It's always something with Harbaugh. It's always something. This guy's been horrible in bowl season, as the worst coach in bowl season in recent history.
Yeah.
And every year you got to worry about him going to the NFL. And this year, not only you have to worry about that, you have this suspension looming. It's always something. It is. Where I just don't think Michigan will ever be able to do it. Now, they have the quarterback. There's some saying that Michigan has a good shot to set the NFL draft pick record, beat Georgia, beat LSU in terms of draft picks. There's 20 players on their roster that have really high draftable grades, which is, it's impressive considering, they have Mozzie Smith. They had some guys go early last year. Michigan's obviously a team. It's going to be sexy to put them in that spot. But what I would also tell you, Brantley, is as great as Cade York was at LSU, Moody, their kicker last year, might have been the best college football kicker I've ever seen. That dude
he was strong.
He was unfreaking believable.
Yeah.
And Michigan they struggled closing drives, and this guy hit big kicks versus Illinois, hit big kicks versus Michigan State to win their games last year. And if I'm a Michigan fan, I could see this falling flat on your face too.
Yeah. Well, to be determined. Anybody else that you see in the college football landscape that we should talk about as potential playoff teams that could run the gauntlet, maybe go undefeated? We'll see them in December and January.
Well, I'll throw Sablasi. Who do you think is the best Group of 5 team this year?
So that's interesting. Obviously I want to think Troy has that opportunity, but dude, the Sun Belt Conference is so strong, and there's so many teams in that conference that could really, we're going to beat each other up. To me, the Sun Belt Conference is what the SEC was in terms of, like, let's say 20 years ago. It's rooted in tradition. You got great teams. You got great fan bases. You got JMU finally becoming eligible. You've got, App State is going to do their thing. You've got, Troy coming back into the mix here. You've got Southern Miss, dude, and the team I'm not a big fan of, South Alabama. Dude, watch those guys. So we're just talking about right here. Oh, I forgot to mention Marshall, right? And we keep going. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many teams in that conference. Like, I don't know who's going to come out of that unscathed. I don't think anybody is. But outside of that, you got Utsa over there. You got Tulane that's going to make a nice run. So, dude, it's going to be interesting this year to see who can kind of go through this and make it through that process. But in the Power 5, dude, this little team out west that hangs out up there, it's all quiet right now, that little team called Oregon, there's some magic brewing. We did lose a receiver over there, too. But so it's going to be interesting this year, and I agree with your take on the West. Like, dude, that's up for grabs. There's so many teams with so much talent there. It's like who can navigate that the best. And that two loss stat that you gave, or that two road game stat, and losing one of those, that's something to really watch here. And
Yeah, it is.
as you watch this thing play out.
That's a deep dive, like you're a deep dive Vegas gambler or something. It's like these are the stats you need to know.
Yeah.
I love that.
Look, so I talked to Patrick Queen about this not too long ago. All right, so PQ's from like around where my mother's family's from, so it was cool. My folks knew his folks, so it was a great interview that we did on the channel, and. So when LSU did that in 2019, the back end of that game was Ole Miss. That was the second game of the back-to-back when they were able to win both of them. LSU did not play well. Okay, and PQ broke it down what actually happened. It was very detailed. I didn't know all this.
Oh wow.
There was communication, all kinds of stuff. But John Rice Plumlee, a true freshman quarterback, gave Dave Aranda his worst defensive performance at LSU.
Yep.
You look at Georgia on the back end of their back-to-back. They beat Kentucky. They were 22-point favorites. They won the game 16-6. Okay, so it's also when if you are able to do it, you're not going to play well in that second game. I mean, you're talking about teenagers who are hopping on planes in 5-day turnarounds. And one of my biggest plays last year, Brantley, was LSU over Mississippi State. Okay, Mississippi State the week before played a night game in Arizona. All right, so you have a bunch of these kids who are mostly from the South flying to the West Coast. Okay, so your body clocks are changing and all of that.
Different time zone.
They played a Pac-12 after dark game. All right, so you got to be a die-hard college football fan to know what a Pac.
Yes,
Mississippi
you do.
State don't know anything about that. They don't know. They got back in at 5 a.m. after that game. Okay,
and then had to play Saturday.
Yes. Oh yeah. Guess what? Guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna throw you back in the plane, and you got to play in the hardest place to play in the freaking sport. A place where dreams come to die. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys dream of playing a game in the stadium. But if you actually go look at how Mississippi State played in that game, they muffed a punt.
Yep.
They started missing a ton of tackles. They had some of the most wide open drops you will ever see in that game.
They did.
And the biggest mystery and the biggest untold story about that game was LSU did not play well that game.
Nope.
But Mississippi State fell apart. Okay. And I was huge on LSU winning that game because of the back-to-back road game stat. So I look for some things like that, I wasn't even betting LSU. I was betting, and it's not always going to work. There's going to be some middle tier team that's able to do it this year.
Oh yeah.
There's quite a few opportunities for some middle tier teams to win back-to-backs, but man, I think one thing people get wrong about college football with the realignment and all that stuff is these kids just do not football players don't travel. All the other sports, you travel a lot. You're on the plane.
Right. That's right.
Football players, you travel 5 times a year if you're a Power 5 player. 5 times. And that's what's really scary about the future of college sports is not only does college football make so much more money than all the other schools or all the other sports, it's all the other sports have drastically different schedules. And
True. I
know a lot of people have made the point about UCLA volleyball playing a game in Rutgers. Right. Yeah. Just could you imagine Mary Jane? She's a libero for the freaking volleyball team, and she's got a chemistry exam the next morning, and she's got to deal with 10-hour jet lag, whatever the case may be. It's freaking brutal. But yeah. Now to your point, Blasi. I really like Tulane this year. Part of it is because I like keeping up with the LSU people that move on. Tulane's Tulane's coaching staff is loaded with LSU guys.
Yep.
And I'm pulling for them. And they get a home game versus Ole Miss in week 2. And Tulane's been very pesky against really good teams in that spot. I mean, they almost beat Oklahoma a few years ago in that spot. So the Fighting Willie Fritzes, I'm really excited.
Oh
to
yeah,
see
man,
what
they're gonna
do this year. So
they're gonna make some
as far
noise.
as a dark horse,
Yeah.
As far as a dark horse, Brantley, I would like to see Tulane. What I think would cause the absolute most chaos is, let's just say LSU runs the table. Tulane runs the table.
Yeah.
And you get a 1-4 playoff matchup between those two schools.
Bring the tiger rag back. Let's get into this. Rivalry can be rekindled.
man.
I'm all for it, dude.
See, that's where it spices it up and makes college football great again in that aspect.
Dude, how crazy.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
had
Well, look, I know we're running a little short on time, but I have to get your take on the LSU and Florida State preview.
Yeah.
That will be coming out this weekend. That's going to be what'll be happening. It's football season. So what's your take on that game? Who wins? Will this ruin either team? Whoever loses, will it ruin their season?
No. I think there's a huge panic on that. Florida State's got a wonderful team. I am really bullish on them this next year. I do think that they win the ACC. They're really good. I mean, Jordan Travis is a really, really great quarterback. And right now in all of college football, I would have him tied as my QB3 in all of CFB, only behind May and Williams and tied with KJ. Now, to Blotsy's great point a minute ago, my favorite Heisman bet is actually Bo Nix. I really like Oregon's schedule, and Heisman voters love a story, and they would love that story to come to fruition, right? The son of an Auburn quarterback with the portal and all of that. So yeah, I think this game will be legendary. I think this game will be a shootout. I'm not ready to just a gazillion % pick LSU because I've picked LSU to win the season opener in the last couple of years. It's not worked out. I might not pick a winner. I might do that. And I got to go on a few Florida State shows over the next week. I'm still not picking a winner on those. But yeah, it should be a fantastic game, and I think LSU will be up for the challenge.
Yeah. I certainly hope so. Of course, they have to avenge last year's opening loss, which in hindsight, even on that night, that wasn't a killer for me. We didn't know what we had. We didn't know where it was. Just like, hey, this is the beginning of a whole new deal. And then, of course, as the season went on, they got better every single week. And if they played that game again, I don't think it would have been an issue. I think they would have smoked Florida State last year if they played it again. That's hypotheticals. We don't speak in all of that stuff. That didn't happen. However, they get a chance to avenge it this year. I think they're going to kick the shit out of them. I mean, that's just me. I'm optimistic and I'm always happy, but I haven't broken it down with the X's and O's. I play with nothing but emotion on this side of the mic.
Absolutely.
And I want to suit up.
As you should. Hey, that's going to be
Go for it,
what
man.
a great way to start college football, though, man. I love those big games. It's like that time we came and watched the Texas game here, the year that LSU went on that amazing run. We watched that game, and what a game that was. And so, dude, that's just a way to start college football. Here's a fact about Bo Nix that you probably may know or may not know. So I mentioned a while ago that we lost a receiver this year to Oregon, that they came and plucked him, but it wasn't your typical standard going and purging from a group of 5 school. That's actually Bo Nix's adopted brother, Tez Johnson, who was our leading receiver last year. He now has an opportunity to go play with his brother. And, dude, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? So I was like, man, thank you, Tez. I totally get it. He's a smaller dude, smaller frame. He's not as tall at all, but he reminds me like a Randy Moss, just how wiry strength he's built. Like he's one of the guys that, dude, he makes plays, can jump through the roof, and just hard to bring down. I think he's going to go out there and in short order he's going to make it. He's going to make some noise. And you talking about a Heisman story, right? If that gets rolling, you know what I mean? That's going to be. Yeah.
Well, I actually did my Heisen preview on my SEC channel, and Bo Nix was my play. Like, I think that I don't think he's the best quarterback, but I think he's got a story, and I think Oregon's schedule sets up really nicely. I'm glad you told me that because I did not know the adopted brother thing. That is absolutely freaking crazy.
And I didn't know it until he left.
Another layer.
I was like, wow, I did not know that Tez Johnson, that was his, adopted brother. So that's awesome, man. That's cool.
That is cool. Well, Carter, I know that we're running a little short on time, but I have to thank you. You have been very instrumental. You don't even know this, but you have been extremely instrumental in how the Tigs Bits podcast is now presented. When you were on a year ago, or a little over a year ago, we had some fun. We're halfway through the show, and you're like, wait, you're showing us some of your beautiful and awesome cards and decorative stuff, all this stuff that you have behind you. And then I'm like, oh yeah, well, I'll edit that out. And you're like, edit it out? What the hell are you going to edit out? And it was like, wait, this isn't video? It's like, no, man. I got some clips and stuff from it, but those were back in the Zoom days. But after that, I listened to that show multiple times, editing it and doing all of that stuff. And I kept hearing your voice telling me, why are you making this hard on yourself and all of that? And I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't know what I was doing. A year later, here we are. We're getting there, but you really are truly the person that I can thank to kind of turn the corner and make me look at things a little bit differently, start to do things a little bit differently. Have a full-on studio. It's no longer a gaming kids setup in here. We've gone full blast, but all of those things really were extremely, extremely helpful. I picked your brain on some stuff over the course of the year throughout the time, but I would be remiss if I did not thank you for that advice and for that help. And so happy to have you back on Tigs Bits and look forward to having you on again, man.
I just care about if my wife and I could come to the tailgate. That's all.
Oh, well,
that is an awesome
She's
tailgate.
always invited, and if you're with her, then that's fine. But
of course.
yes.